Okay, well, welcome everyone. In case you don't know me, there's some new people on. My name is Claire Slattery. I'm the Executive Director of the Lake Zurich Area Chamber of Commerce. We are so happy to have such a great group here with us today, both members and non-members of the Chamber, and it's great. We're always looking to help, really any business in our area that on a variety of topics, and this of course is the hottest topic right now, right? So we're so honored to have Inland Bank able to provide this information, and Michael Forr is our speaker, and thank them so much for being able to be here with us today. I did want to share with you two things before I pass it over to Alyssa. One is I would like to make sure if you are, in fact, a member, I'm using every opportunity right now on Zoom to make sure that you are receiving at least emails from us at least every Monday. On Monday, we send a happenings email that comes out, and it talks about pretty much everything that's going on that you need to know for the week. So we've been hearing that some people aren't getting them, and just want to make sure. There's some spam issues, of course, so hopefully you are, and if not, shoot us an email and let us know so we can investigate it for you. The second thing I have for you today is we did post last week about this new grant program through Lake County. Lake County was awarded $121 million under the CARES Act, and they are starting to figure out how to disperse that. And the starting out the gate is a $10 million program to support our local businesses. So the application process is still being finalized and should be available soon. And so that's why it's important to make sure you're receiving at least our Monday emails, because that'll come out. And if it comes out, any time in between, obviously we'll send a note out to our members for that. So if you still need some funds, it'll be available. And the nice thing about this is that, so what I know so far is that they are grants. So they're forgivable. So with that, I'm going to pass things over to Alyssa, our events and communications coordinator. Alyssa?
Hi everyone, I'm Alyssa. Like Claire said, I run the events and communications for the Chamber. And I just wanted to real quickly let you know that we are launching a campaign called Shop Local Bingo, and the goal is to drive community members back out to our local businesses again after all the restrictions and everything, the stay-at-home orders. We really want to encourage community members to go out back to our local businesses again. So we're doing this in a form of a fun bingo game. And also, if you don't have a storefront, you're still able to participate in this. You can do different things like invite people to like your Facebook page, call your business, get a quote. There's a lot of different things that we can do. We can work with you. And if you're a member, the cost to participate is $75. We have a few squares left, and we are now opening this up to non-members. So if you're a non-member, the fee will be $125. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put my email address in the chat function. So if you're interested in learning more or want to discuss this a little bit further, you can just email me directly and we can talk about it. So, and right now we have all of you on mute. As we go through this presentation, if you have any questions, there are two things that you can do. One, you can put your question in the chat box, and then we will address your question when we get to the Q&A section at the end. Or you can wait until we get to the Q&A section, and you can just raise your hand using the little raise hand button in Zoom. And then we'll come to you, we'll unmute you, so then you can then ask your question at that time. So we just ask that everyone stays on mute during the presentation, and then we'll address all the questions at the end. So without further ado, I am proud to introduce Michael Forr. He is the manager of business banking at Inland Bank. So Michael, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you very much. And thank you to the Lake Zurich Area Chamber of Commerce for putting on this hopefully valuable webinar for its members and area businesses. And thank you for inviting me. This webinar comes out at very good timing. Last week, the Treasury came out with their final application for PPP forgiveness. And what I'm going to do here quickly before we get started is go to show you how you can go find the application. So a lot of you have probably been here. This is simply treasury.gov/cares. From there, you click on the Assistance for Small Businesses, and that takes you to all the information that you need in terms of the Paycheck Protection Program. The applications are listed under the Forr borrowers. These are the four forms, which I'll go over a little bit later as we go through the webinar. But those just came out last week. So this is very good timing to have this call. All right, let me get back now into the presentation. Slideshow. Okay, there we go. The bottom line with the forgiveness application and the forgiveness process is that borrowers are eligible for forgiveness of eligible costs during the covered period. The covered period was recently extended. Originally, as you all know, that was an 8-week period, and with the Flexibility Act, they extended that to 24 weeks. So you're still eligible to apply after 8 weeks, but you have a full 24 weeks in order to use the funds if you need it. Speaking of timing, I did get some more information today from the SBA in terms of timing. They currently are not able to accept applications. They have no way for banks to do that at this point. They're working on how they're gonna manage that process. The rep that I talked to thought it would be closer to the 24-week mark that they're gonna actually be ready to start accepting applications. So even if your 8 weeks is up and you're ready to submit your application, the banks may be able to accept it, but they won't be able to submit it until the SBA advises the banks on how that process is gonna work. Just a couple other notes on timing. Once an application is submitted, the bank has 60 days to submit it to the SBA. And then the SBA actually has 90 days to review it if they choose to do so. So unfortunately, I don't suspect that this is gonna be a really quick process. That's the bad news. The good news is with the 24-week covered period, I think most businesses should be very comfortably able to spend enough eligible costs during that time frame to get full forgiveness of their loan. Just a quick note on the alternative covered period is just if the timing of your pay periods don't match up well with the disbursement date, you can go with your, you can start your covered period on the first day of the first payroll after you receive the funds. Okay, so eligible costs are payroll costs incurred during the covered period. Payroll costs include certain benefits such as healthcare benefits and 401k contributions. For self-employed businesses, the payroll costs are simply a factor of your 2019 Schedule C income from line 31. The cap is 2.5 months, which is all you could apply for anyway, so that's all you need. And it's further capped at $20,833, which is the 2.5 month equivalent for income of 100,000 or more. Since there's a cap of 100,000 for any individual's income. Eligible non-payroll costs include mortgage interest, rent or lease payments, and covered utilities. And as we'll go through a little later, you may not necessarily need to include any of those. With the 24 weeks, you'll probably be able to earn forgiveness on the payroll costs alone, in which case you're not going to need to worry about those. So we'll cover that a little bit later. So the first thing you want to do is determine if you're eligible to use the form EZ. And real quick, I'll go back to the website and show you there's two sets of applications. So the first set is the Form EZ, and then the second one is the standard forms. In this case, here are the instructions for the Form EZ. And I'll go back to okay, so in order to use the Form EZ, you must meet one of these three criteria. Self-employed, independent contractors, and sole proprietorships, you're automatically, with no other employees, you're automatically eligible to use the Form EZ. Other criteria are if you had no salary reductions of greater than 25% for any individual employees and you didn't reduce your full-time equivalent employees, you're eligible to use this form. Or if you didn't reduce salaries and you were limited due to compliance with COVID-related regulatory requirements. So just from my reading of this, it seems that most businesses should be able to justify using the Form EZ, because I think in terms of, having to be limited due to COVID-related regulatory requirements is going to apply to a lot of businesses. Okay. If you use the standard form, if you're not eligible to use the Form EZ, then the additional information required is going to be the Schedule A worksheet, which feeds into Schedule A, which feeds into your forgiveness calculation. Essentially, everything that's different about the standard form is a potential reduction in the forgivable amount due to reduced salaries or reduced full-time equivalent employees. So that's why those are the two things that make you eligible to use the Form EZ. Okay, the next step is to complete your application. When you complete your application, you'll see that regardless of which application you're using, you're eligible for the lower of these three items, which is the sum of your eligible costs, your loan amount, or the payroll cost test calculation. And I'll give you an example of the payroll cost test calculation a bit later. With the 24 weeks that you have to use, it's hopefully the lowest of those three is going to be your loan amount, and obviously it's capped at that because you can't have amounts forgiven greater than the loan amount. So ideally, number 1 and 3 here are greater than your loan amount, and you'll get full forgiveness. And I'm just going to show you quickly on the application where that is. So this is the EZ application. You can see that the forgiveness amount is the smallest of lines 5, 6, and 7. 5 is a sum of your eligible costs. 6 is your loan amount, and 7 is your payroll cost calculation. And just for comparison, here is the standard form, and you can see that the additional lines in the standard form are related to full-time equivalent and employee salary calculations. All right. Okay, so step 3 is to submit your application. What you need to submit is going to be the application form plus all documentation verifying your eligible costs. So for payroll records, your third-party payroll statements and bank account statements will likely be the form of documentation that you're going to need to submit. Essentially, every cost that you're claiming is an eligible cost for forgiveness you need to have backup for. And what you're going to submit to the bank is going to be the completed application plus that documentation. And then if you're doing the standard form, you'll also need your Schedule A. You don't need to submit your Schedule A worksheet, but you will need to retain that. So in terms of documentation to be retained, basically everything you submitted to the bank, plus if you're doing the standard form, your worksheet A, needs to be retained, and they say it needs to be retained for 6 years in case the SBA comes back at any point to audit your PPP loan. I think it's going to be unlikely given the tremendous volume of PPP loans that were made, but it's best to be safe and follow those guidelines. All right, so here is the example of your payroll cost ratio calculation. If your total payroll costs that you're claiming is eligible cost is $50,000 and your non-payroll cost is $50,000, you can see that you're not meeting that 60% threshold. It's not all or nothing. That doesn't mean that you're not eligible for any forgiveness. All that you have to do is apply this calculation, which is to take your payroll cost divided by 0.6, and that's going to come up with in this case, it comes up with an amount of $83,333, which is making it equivalent to a 60-40 split between the payroll and non-payroll costs. Like I've stated a couple times, given the extension of time to 24 weeks, it's likely that this is not going to be as much of a factor as it would have been prior, because you have more time to use the funds for payroll, which is the easiest way to get forgiveness. And the more you use for payroll, the less likely that this is going to come into play. So for those using the standard form, this is just a quick example of what the full-time equivalent reduction quotient, how that applies. So if you had 15 employees during the reference period, so that would be a period from 2019 prior to everything that happened with COVID, and you had 12 during the covered period, that puts you at 80% capacity in terms of your full-time equivalent employees. So in that case, you take your eligible cost times the 80%. And so if your costs were 100,000, then the amount would be reduced to 80. And so in these examples, let me just go back real quick. So with these examples, that 80,000 is what's going to be here. It's your eligible cost times your full-time equivalent reduction quotient. The 83,000, if we're using those same examples, would be here. And so if your loan amount was only 60,000, then you get full forgiveness. And even though these two were reduced, it didn't affect your forgiveness because they were still both greater than your loan amount. All right, so this is a quick recap of the steps. First, you determine the appropriate application. You complete the application, submit it, and then these are a couple of the notes on the timing that I discussed earlier. The bank has 60 days to submit it to the SBA, and the SBA has 90 days to review it if they choose to do so. The truth is, we don't really know how that process is going to go. As with a lot of the Paycheck Protection Program, things change as time goes on, and we just have to kind of roll with it. Also, in terms of submitting your application, I know a lot of people are anxious to get going, especially if they've already spent enough money to get full forgiveness. But banks are still working to try to figure out how to handle that process. And since the SBA can't accept them at this point anyway, they may be taking some more time to make sure that they get that right and do it in a way that's easiest for them and for their customers. For instance, a lot of banks are probably creating a portal where you can go in and enter all the information directly on the website, or even purchasing third-party software that does the same thing. And what that's going to do is going to make it a little bit easier to go in and enter your information, and it's going to ensure all the calculations were done correctly. All right. So that's it for the recap of the forgiveness process, and I'm sure there's some questions, and I am happy to answer all the questions that I can.
So we haven't had any questions come through in the chat. Does anyone just again click the raise your hand function in Zoom if you have any questions? Any questions, anybody?
Stacy?
Oh,
Go ahead, Stacy.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes.
Okay, because it says I was muted. I'm just a little not sure what the right thing to do is. So there's 4 of us that are on the payroll. We're an S corporation. 2 of us are owners. One's a full-timer and one's a part-timer. So as far as the payroll records that I get from the accountant, they have all 4 of us on there. Obviously, I'll have to manually subtract out the part-time employee, but will that payroll report still be okay for justification, or do I need something else from the accountant saying, well, these 3 people were the only ones that were full-time?
Okay, yeah. So first, the part-time employee's salary does count. So when we're talking about full-time equivalents, they are, the worksheet A, what it does is your part-time employee is going to count as 0.5. Or you can do actual hours and have a precise calculation of what the equivalent they are to a full-time employee. But their salary, if they're a salaried employee,
No,
their costs are eligible for forgiveness. So you do not have to subtract them out.
so they are eligible, or they're not eligible?
They are, yes.
Okay, well, they're not, she's not salary, she's hourly and commission.
Well, that's okay. Whatever you pay her is eligible, as long as it's not 1099. So that's, then it's eligible, yes. Those are eligible costs. And then in terms of you as owners, if you calculated your share based on a 2019 Schedule C, then that's all you're going to need for verification for those expenses. And then for the other employee or employees, it would be the payroll records.
Okay.
Stacy, does that answer your question, or you still?
I'm still kind of confused, but I guess I'll read over the application again.
And Michael, would you be available for such questions if people have them afterward?
Sure, yeah.
We'll give that information to Stacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And another suggestion I would make is accountants are very familiar with this process. They're having to assist a lot of their customers with the application and with the forgiveness, and they may be a good resource as well if you're having any confusion as you're trying to complete the forgiveness application.
Okay.
So to coincide with that, there was a statement made, if we had 4 to start and we need to pay 4 to qualify, I assume they don't have, would they have to be the same 4, or if one found another job, would we need to hire another?
Yeah, there's a couple things there. They would not have to be the same 4. It's just the number of employees. And there's a couple safe harbor regulations in terms of the full-time equivalent calculation. So if you rehired to the level of 4 where you were at in the reference period or in before COVID by 12/31/20, then you don't need to worry about how many employees you had during the covered period. So if you brought your staff back up to full capacity by the end of this year, then it doesn't matter if you went down to 1 or 2 during the covered period. The second safe harbor is if you tried to hire them back and they refused to come back, then you don't need to worry about the full-time equivalent calculation in that case either. Otherwise, if you really did just go down to 3 and weren't able to come back up to 4 because of everything that happened, then you may need to do that calculation, in which case you take 75% of your eligible costs. However, I'm going to go back real quick to the, let me go back to this, I'll go, the full-time equivalents are not a factor if you're using the Form EZ. And so I just go back to this where it says if you didn't reduce anybody's salaries by more than 25% and you were unable to operate at the same level due to compliance with COVID-related regulatory requirements, then you're filling out the Form EZ and you're not going to need to worry about your full-time equivalent calculation.
Go ahead, Alyssa.
Okay, so we have some questions in the chat box, so I'm just gonna go through those now. The first one is,
Sure.
How is the cap on salary calculated?
The cap on salary is annualized salary of 100,000. So if you're self-employed, then it just limits the amount of payroll you can count for any individual to 20,833, which is 2.5 months salary of 100,000 annualized salary. So the way it's calculated is, you would prepare a worksheet with everybody's salary, and if anybody makes over 100,000, you would have to reduce that to equivalent of 100,000 when you're calculating your eligible payroll costs. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah.
Right.
Alyssa,
Yeah.
you have a few hands raised too, just so you know.
Yeah, okay. I see that Valaya Extra Mile, I'm gonna unmute you and you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi guys, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. I am here because one of my clients applied and got approved through Inland Bank. Thank you for that. However, now we are in the process of preparing everything for the forgiveness application. And since they received a substantially higher amount of loan, we were wondering, are we going to have a particular person that we're going to be dealing with? I'm assuming you're going to probably create an online portal, but in case any discrepancies come up, or in case someone from Inland needs more verification or clarification from us, are we going to be communicating with a real person?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. If you submit everything through whatever portal we put together and everything looks great, a real person will be in touch to let you know you're all good. Or if there's any issues, they'll definitely be in touch to go over that with you.
Kevin Drucker, we have a question. What are deemed transportation costs on page 2, item 2C?
Let me see. Transportation costs on page 2, item 2C. Are we talking about the forgiveness instructions.
Kevin, I'm gonna go ahead and unmute you and maybe you can.
Yeah, that would probably be better.
Question.
Yeah, it's item 2C on the original application that came out. There's a vague line. It says covered utility payments, business payments for services of electricity, gas, water, transportation.
You know, that's something that is vague, and you know, that's the best. That's right here, and
Correct.
you know, that's the best that I can tell. Either it's, you know, that's in reference to utility payments. So, you know, what they consider to be transportation utility payments is not clear just from this language. You know, maybe, you know, if you want to get advice from your accountant to see what they think that is allowable. It's really, you know, what you're going to be the one that's certifying that it's an eligible expense. And so as long as, you know, you feel confident that it's something that can be included, then you're welcome to include it. But hopefully with the 24 weeks, you're not going to need to worry about, you know, an item like that. Because, you know, the loan amount was only 2.5 months payroll, and you have essentially 5.5 months to use the funds.
My guess too on that is, I mean, I'm thinking of all the different types of members we have, and that could be maybe applied to manufacturers who do have transportation costs in terms of shipment deliveries and things like that. So I don't know that it would be like relative to us using our cars to go do business, but maybe that aspect of it. So that's
yeah, I don't know. It's not really a utility. That is a good question, and I don't have an answer for that.
Okay, and then we had one more question from Kevin. That was, if a business uses all of their funds after week 12, can they file for forgiveness then, or do they have to wait until the 24-week period is over?
I don't think it's going to hurt to wait until the 24-week period is over, because it's probably, we won't even be able to submit it to the SBA until then. But my guess is that you can submit it as soon as you used enough funds. But you know, these applications just came out last week, and like I said, we don't even know how they're going to be submitted to the SBA, so it's not completely clear. But if I had to guess, I'd say you can complete your forgiveness application as soon as you're ready and have utilized the full amount.
Okay, great. And then we have a question from Alice. For documentation, will we need to provide Fed 941 forms as proof of payroll, or would only bank statements showing payroll checks written suffice?
You'll probably need both. So the payroll records, your quarterly 941s, plus the bank account and third-party payroll documentation. I would have all of those available to submit to the bank.
Okay, great. And then we have a question from Michael Glover. If the funds are used other than for payroll, how are the rent and utilities forgiven?
Can you repeat that?
If the funds are used other than for payroll, how are rent and utilities forgiven?
I'm not sure I understand the question, but they would be eligible costs. So you have your eligible payroll and eligible non-payroll costs, and in the application you're gonna state your payroll and non-payroll costs, and they're going to go into the form. So I'm not really sure I understand
Okay, I'm gonna
the question there.
Does that have something to do with the percentages? Because didn't they change the percentages of utilities being at like 25% and?
That's the 60% calculation, it was 75% and they reduced it to 60%.
60% for
A
salaries?
minimum of 60% has to be used for payroll.
Okay, so 40% for, okay, utilities.
Up to 40% can be used for non-payroll.
Okay.
Okay, and then, good. It was from Tom Clark. We have, I just filled out a PPP application and the bank CIBC last week. The form CIBC gave me had a period of 8 weeks. When did the 24 weeks come into play? So I'm guessing that was with the new law that just passed.
It did, but the 24 weeks applies to everybody regardless of when you applied and got your loan. So regardless of what that says, you have 24 weeks.
Okay. Okay, and then
Yeah, they would not be allowed to restrict you to 8-week cover period.
okay.
Not be allowed.
Great. And then he followed up with that with, for clarity, after we receive the loan from the PPP, then we need to file for forgiveness.
Well, you file for forgiveness after your covered period ends. Yes. Yeah.
Great. And then we have a question from Pete Salerno. For solo self-employed, since we do not have official payment documentation, do we just submit bank account records?
You don't even need that. For solo self-employed, they're going to go off of your 2019 Schedule C. So the only thing they might require is to get the filed tax return. So when you applied, you could just complete your Schedule C. It didn't have to be filed at that point. For forgiveness, they may require you to file your tax return and provide that. But it's all based on your 2019 Schedule C. So you do not need to show records for the covered period.
Okay, great. And then we have one more question. Will Inland tell the borrower the proposed decision that they are going to send to the SBA?
Yes, yeah. Well, especially, I mean, if there's any difference, of course, yes.
Okay. Okay, great. And then I
If
see
you
we have
submit proposed forgiveness, and we agree, then yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, so I see we have a hand raised. Richard, I'm going to go over to you. I'm going to unmute you right now. And whenever you're ready, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, this is Gloria. It's just on Rich's iPad.
Oh, hi, Gloria.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Just a quick question, and it doesn't seem to be clear. When it says payroll costs, does that include all the liabilities that go with it, or is it just the net that we're including?
I'm not sure. So payroll costs are the costs incurred and paid during the covered period. So it's your salaries and your wages that were paid plus benefits.
But benefits, so it does not include the liabilities I have to pay for unemployment, Social Security, Medicare, all those. It doesn't include any of those fees. It's just the straight net.
So actually, if we go back to this, I'm going to go back to this page here.
I was trying to log into the ruling on that. It says 85 FR 20811 as of April 2nd, but on the Treasury statement, it doesn't have anything that goes that far back. And they probably have new rules since then.
So I was looking for, there's a good summary of what counts as a payroll cost. Let me see quickly if it's on this application. Okay. Actually, if you want to follow up with me, I was trying to find, there's a good summary of what counts as a payroll cost. It's on this page here somewhere.
Okay.
but I can't find it right offhand. But
Gotcha.
you'll just have to refer to the defined payroll cost to find out if what your question is included or not.
Okay, this is a new form, so I only had the old one, sorry. But I couldn't find it. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So quickly, I'm going to take off Vilaya extra mile tax. They said that they have some answers to some of these questions that have been coming up. So I'm just going to unmute.
Sure.
Hi, everyone. Again, Michael, thank you for allowing me, and Claire, for allowing me to clarify some of those respectfully, because we've been reading all of the interim rules, and we're dealing with those questions on a daily basis. Now, on what's allowed as payroll costs, I'll tell all the employers, the way you calculate this, you take the gross that you pay to your employee, which includes their payroll tax portion. You include simply the gross, meaning if you pay someone $4,000, that's what you include. They may get paid $3,500 because of reductions due to their portion of the payroll. That don't get bothered by that. Just include the gross. And then if any employee receives more than, if you go by 8 weeks, if any employee receives more than $15,385, deduct anything above that. Or if you choose the 24-week, depending on when you get the loan, anything over 46,000, deduct anything above that amount. But just use the gross pay. What you do not include, that's very important, do not include the portion for the payroll tax that is coming from the employer, just employer portion. The 7.65% for Medicare and Social Security tax is not included. What else is included when it comes to taxes is you do include the unemployment tax portion that you pay to the state of Illinois. That is included, and it's easily provable by submitting your 941s that you submitted with the state with the IDES. So that amount, all of it is includable. Now, on the question for transportation, unfortunately, the SBA has been really unclear about that. They only posted one sentence. This could be found in the final interim rule that came out, I believe, on May 16th. That's the ruling that specifically talks about Schedule C applicants and borrowers. For some reason, they stated that this goes into utility, and it's a gas expense is considered transportation only for leased vehicles, assuming that's a vehicle you use in your Schedule C business. And also another requirement for this is that you deduct this on your Schedule C. Only then they would allow this as utility for some reason. I don't know how that would apply to a corporation because it's in the interim ruling for Schedule C filers. We have clients with big trucking companies. They would certainly have transportation costs on their leased vehicles, but we are not including that because we are currently uncertain. And I was hoping to actually find that answer from Inland for my client, but here in Michael, he would share my opinion. We don't know at this point. But for Schedule C filers, you could probably use that. And I think Stacy, when she was asking about the employees at the beginning of this, when she wasn't sure. So part-time employees, yes, you do include in the way. I would suggest Stacy and everyone else calculates the hours for their employees would be this. If you haven't received the spreadsheet from your accountant, try to create one. Line up 8 weeks and the name of each employee. And for each week, if they are getting paid hourly, and if they're not a full-time employee, then list the number of hours they worked during that particular week. Then when I say 8 weeks, I also mean 24 if that's the period you're gonna use. Then sum this up for each employee individually and divide it by 40. That would show you the average FTE count, full-time equivalent count for this particular employee. When you do that for each employee separately, then at the very end, you total the amount of all of the FTEs that you have. And that's the number of the FTEs that you had throughout the whole covered period. I hope that clarifies some of your questions. Thank you.
And just going back to what I was looking for, so it was where I thought if you go to for borrowers, more information, and on page 2 here, what counts as payroll costs, it's a pretty good, easy to understand summary of what counts.
Okay, great. Someone asked what Form 9441 is. Could you just clarify that?
If you have employees, then you have to file 941s quarterly and a 940 annually. If you're self-employed, it doesn't apply.
Okay, great. And then we have a question from Brent Anderson. If we do not use third party for payroll, what do we need to submit?
Whatever internal payroll records you have and bank account statements.
Okay, great. So that is all the questions that we have so far on chat. It looks like nobody else's hand is raised. Does anyone else have any questions? No? Okay. All right then. Well, we'd like to thank again Michael for giving us this presentation. This was a lot of information, and I know a lot of you guys have had a lot of questions, so it was great to dedicate all this time today to your questions, and we hope that everyone's questions were answered. So thank you very much. Michael, do you have any final thoughts?
No, thank you for having me and for putting on this valuable webinar for your members.
All right, great. Thanks, everyone. Claire, do you have anything else to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure to invite everyone to our virtual networking event next Tuesday, the 30th at 11 a.m. It's on our calendar. And our virtual networking events have been really successful because they're events that you can just jump on and everyone gets like a minute or so to give an update as to who they are in their business. And, you know, you get to meet people virtually. So that's it. Thank you guys so much for everyone's participation today. And certainly let Alyssa or I know if you have follow-up questions that we can pass on to Michael. There we go.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.